Okay, so for paper 2, which is on Wednesday the 5th of June, I'm just going to go through some kind of like questions and analyze kind of what I would write for them. For example, look at this 6 marker. It's in section A, because I could see it's a question 1 question. Now that could either be, something I looked at for Bristol or Rio. Now it says use figure 3 and a case study in a city in a LIC or NEE. So that could only be Rio. And now what's the actual question asking us? It's asking you about like 2 things here. So you need to be careful about traffic congestion and air pollution and why they might be challenging. So if you just tell me what's bad about it, so like the problems, you'll only get a certain amount of marks, but you should talk about the issue of traffic and air pollution. So I'd first of all mention that traffic obviously will lead to like, very slow journeys, because of the amount of traffic build up in Rio and then people becoming late to work. That's just saying a problem. You could put that in a mini paragraph. You can also talk about how air pollution is really bad because of the factories and the cars creating smog. And then you can link it to maybe something about like how it affects people, but it's not really asking you that. It's more asking you how come they are challenging. Why is it so hard to kind of like fix? And therefore you need to talk about why it's a challenge. Now look at this. You must mention, and don't just tell me the problems about what's so bad about it, but tell me why it's so hard to fix. So I would say that traffic is a real challenge in Rio because remember Rio was built around this massive kind of like steep slopes, mountainous area. So it's quite difficult to build roads around a mountainous area. So you'd have to mention that, oh yeah, they have got lots of narrow roads. That's really getting into the kind of like top marks there. And I'd also mention that because there's so many people coming into the kind of city from the countryside, so rural to urban migration, what's going to happen is the demand for cars will increase and factories will also increase because you'll need way more energy. So that is that question broken down for you there. So have a look at this 9 marker. It's a to what extent question, so make sure you address throughout the 9 marker that, oh yeah, it's a large extent. A lot of people get worried about the word urban change. Just ignore that. It just means how has it changed for an urban way, and you've looked at all of that. So don't let that word confuse you. Just focus on the key buzzwords, which is environmental challenges. That's the only word you need to think about in this 9 marker. And obviously it says UK city, so don't start talking about Nigeria, don't start talking about Rio or whatever, because some people just need to read carefully. And obviously we know the UK city you studied, the one where you looked at environmental challenges, is Bristol, guys. So let's go into it. So I'd go in with the first environmental challenge. If you remember, it's that the fact that Bristol was an old industrial city and it's changed over time. And that's what it means by urban change. So it's changed from an industrial city. So therefore, what happened if all these industrial companies closed down? You could mention that, by the way, is that there were many warehouses left behind. And what happened with those warehouses that they've been left there. No one's ever used them again. So they've been what? Derelict. So you mentioned the fact derelict. Why is derelict a problem? You talk about how obviously that kind of creates an ugly city. It ruins the kind of like niceness of a city. So I'd mention how it creates visual pollution, and often with these kind of buildings, squatters can take over them. That's one kind of paragraph there, guys, 1 point developed. So that could get you 2 to 3 marks. I'd mention another environmental challenge. So you must at least go for 2 points. I always go for 3, but urban sprawl. So another environmental challenge is that, the fact that actually more housing is needed in Bristol. Urban sprawl is the physical growth of a city. So I would say many people are moving to that kind of rural urban fringe. So they're moving away from the city, living on that edge near the kind of rural fringe, urban fringe. But why is that a bad thing for the environment? Because it just means that we're going to destroy more green spaces. So very much like the pre-release that we've been looking at. Loss of biodiversity will happen. Obviously, the amount of habitats will be lost. But also, you got to mention that actually, if you're taking away all this green space, that increases the flood risk because green spaces are permeable surfaces. So far, that's 2 paragraphs. That's about like, maybe 5 marks there. If you address the extent, saying this is to a large extent, you might get another mark. You could give all these other arguments about air pollution, many people own cars, huge amounts of CO2 release. You could talk about the greenhouse effect, but that I don't really like that argument. Or about waste pollution, how there's lots of, there's a huge population in Bristol. They produce millions of tons of waste, which ends up in landfill sites, and that rotting rubbish can release greenhouse gases. So all of that is calm, but to get the 9 marks, guys, you need to really be able to say and these 9 markers are sometimes so different depending on the 9 marker. You then talk about, to a large extent, Bristol has created environmental opportunities. Mention urban greening. There are over 400 parks, 8 nature reserves. Why is that really good? Because it provides space for habitats, thousands of trees being planted. That improves the air quality, reduces the flood risk. And there you go. That will get you that kind of 9 marks there.